60 kilometres off Western Australia's coast, scattered through the Indian Ocean, lies an archipelago of 122 islands. Shipwrecks litter the waters. Human bones litter its soil. It's a treacherous place, but a beautiful one. There are no palm trees, hotels or restaurants. The howling southerly wind keeps the surface of the islands bare. But under the water, it's a diver's dream. The islands have a deep history. It's one of the first places in Australia seen by European explorers. 150 years before Captain Cook arrived, early European visitors marked the archipelago on their maps as a place of danger. These are the Houtman Abrolhos Islands, a rugged paradise.
These islands sit out on the edge of the continental shelf, and over the last 300,000 or 400,000 years, which in geological times is really quite recent, the sea level's been up and down 3 or 4, half a dozen times. The last time it dropped off in about 15,000, 20,000 years ago, down 125 metres below what the sea level is today. And so the islands were in fact on the edge of the mainland at that stage, and the sea, the coast, was even further to the west. And so over the last 10,000 years, that sea level's gradually risen up until about 5,000 years ago. It even got a little bit higher than it is now, and it's dropped back to where it is today. So these islands are the tops of the hills that were around on the edge of the mainland, back when those sea levels were very much lower. Aboriginal people would have, a lot of their sustenance came from coastal resources, so fish and shellfish and other things you can find along the coast. So living along the coast was really important to them. So as the coast moved inland, of course they've moved inland as well. Some of their stories talk about the changing sea levels. Rising sea levels change currents enormously, but it would seem that the Lewin current has been fairly well in place for quite a long time, and at different periods it's probably come and gone as well. It's quite different in that respect. We've got a warm current that comes down, helps the coral grow, really a long way south, but at the same time there's a fair bit of cold water mixes with it as well, so you've got this interesting overlap. Quite different to what you get off Africa or South America.
The Lewin Current is the longest continuous coastal current system in the world. It's formed in the northwest of Western Australia and sweeps down the coast, turning to reach as far as the southwest of Tasmania, 5,500 kilometres away. It brings warm tropical water from the north, raising the sea temperature of these waters by several degrees. The warm current provides for more than 200 species of coral, making it a truly wonderful place to swim and dive. But this hidden beauty under the surface is also a deadly hazard for ships.
Through the 1500s, they'd pretty much relied on the Portuguese to bring the spices back to Holland. They would trade them around Europe. But there was a lot of conflict between the Dutch and the Spanish and so on, and eventually they decided to go and get them themselves. So Frederick and his brother were sent to Lisbon to actually try and find out all of the trading secrets and to act as spies down there. So they first went off as spies. So they had the charts and the maps and they had a bit of the trading information. And so Frederick and his brother went out with the first fleet of 4 ships from Holland. A disastrous voyage. To cut a long story short around this, they came back with only 3 ships. Only 95 or so of the 245 men they left with. So many died from scurvy. They got involved with skirmishes all of the way through, but they came back with a little bit of spice. So on his 4th voyage out, by this stage the Dutch had found a quicker way to get to the East Indies. They had been following the Portuguese. So they would go diagonally from the Cape of Good Hope, the tip of Africa, more or less diagonally across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia. And that could be, if you didn't get the winds right or if you got caught in the doldrums, that could take months and months to get across there. And a fellow called Brower decided that if you actually went a little bit further south, you could pick up the roaring 40s, as we call them today, these really strong westerly winds, and zip across a long way to the east, and then if you headed north, you could make your way up to Indonesia. What he also found was that if you did come across, you could pick up the southeast trade wind, so you more or less had a tailwind all of the way from Africa all the way to Indonesia. And, you know, these old sailing ships really needed a tailwind. So I cut the journey down by 6 months, and that became the adopted route. And so inevitably, sooner or later, somebody went a little bit further east than they needed to. Dirk Hartog, 1616, right into the island that now bears his name up near Shark Bay. Houtman, aboard a ship called the Dordrecht, they came in down their Cape Naturalist. And they, a big surprise, there's not supposed to be anything here, maybe there's a big landmass here. So they decided they'd explore a little bit. They sailed up the coast, and the reefs along the coast here are quite treacherous. They decided it was getting too dangerous, and so they'd head out to sea. So when they headed out to sea, inevitably, if you're in the right spot, they suddenly found out in the middle of the open ocean this string of islands. So they're quite fortunate because they went through in the early hours of the morning and the night of the 29th, and they'd set a northeasterly course. So I guess they'd picked up a tailwind and were heading northeast, thinking their way out in the open ocean, and they skirted by the edge of the islands. So Houtman wrote on his chart Abrolhos, which in those days was a term that the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the English and the Dutch all recognised meant danger. It means keep your eyes open, literally, but it's very complicated, the etymology of it, but the sailors all understood that. That's what it meant. It meant keep your eyes open, watch out. And so that's what he would have scribbled, and he recorded that in some letters. When those little scribbles got back to Holland, they put it on the map. Because there's another Abrolhos Islands already off the coast of Brazil, they added the prefix Houtman, and so hence we get Houtman Abrolhos Islands. Yeah, so the history after that, the islands were encountered by other groups through there. Of course, the Batavia story is just 10 years later, after Houtman, quickly put them on the map and made people very aware of them.
Classed as one of Australia's most horrendous maritime mutinies, 125 survivors of the Batavia shipwreck were murdered by a group of mutineers led by fellow survivor and noted psychopath Hieronymus Cornelius. Until the 1980s, Beacon Island had several fishermen living in shacks here. But while digging a leach drain, a fisherman discovered bone fragments in the sand. Since then, the shacks have been removed, and the island is now an historic archaeological gold mine for historians and researchers, making this island one of the most intriguing places for people to see when they visit the Abrolhos.
Thereafter, during the 1600s, they appear on some of the coastal profiles as Batavia's graveyard, as we see with Beacon Island. You know, Batavia's graveyard was what it was named. And it wasn't until really the early 1800s that some proper mapping was done. 1727, the Zawick was wrecked because they were there for nearly 9 months, surviving, building another ship. They actually made a fairly comprehensive map of the southern group, the Pelsart group. So that appeared on the maps in the early 1800s, even that the English produced. But the first accurate charting of the whole of the islands, and this is where most of the names come from, was by Wickham and Stokes. These were British hydrographers. They were on the ship the Beagle, the one that Charles Darwin made famous, and they went all around the islands, taking depth measurements, marking up the shape and the position of all the islands, and putting names on about a dozen or 20 or so of them.
The Houtman Abrolhos are clustered into 3 main groups: the Wallaby Group, Easter Group and Pelsart Group, often referred to as the Southern Group. The islands extend from north to south across 100 kilometres of ocean.
In the early days, a lot of shipping went up and down along the coast here, and so they became familiar with guano there. So guano mining and beach demare, the sea cucumbers, they were collected in the mid-1840s. There's a little company set up, the Pelsart Fishing Company, and you know, the remains of their camp are probably what you see on Middle Island. Guano mining was a really big operation. There were ships coming in and loading thousands of tons of guano and taking it off to Europe. A lot of it didn't make its way to Fremantle or Australia at all. It went straight from the islands to Germany, where it was really used as an important fertiliser. So, quite intensive infrastructure put in. Big jetties, quite a lot of buildings, 40 or 50 or more Asiatics, as they called them, were brought in from Singapore and Batavia and places to the north to work the guano fields. Very tedious. Sweep it up, move the rocks, sweep up basically the soil, just full of old bird droppings and bird skeletons and God knows what all. Sieve it out, dry it out, put it into bags and ship it off to Europe. And at the same time, fishermen were coming up from Fremantle at different times, Italian fishermen, and having a bit of a fishing trip, head back, keep the fish alive in their well boats, and try and get back to Fremantle really quickly with a fresh load of fish. been a big part of Geraldton's history in terms of the fishing industry, because a lot of fishermen would head out there for an island season. The first catches coming back in, all of the stories that would come back and the disasters and everything that happened, the good times, the bad times. There was always something going on at the Abrolhos, and it was just over the horizon, you know, so it really became a part of Geraldton's identity.
The islands are a treasure hove for rock lobster, and they've been exploited in a sustainable way by fishermen, about 150 odd fishermen for the last 50 years, and their families.
During the war years, the canner in Geraldton got into full swing, and so a lot of crays were caught and brought and canned for the armed forces. And then after the Second World War, refrigerated shipping became available, and so frozen tails are much in demand in America. And so the industry really took off around catching the crayfish, freezing the tails and then shipping them to America. These things actually put Geraldton a bit on the map, you know, with people who after the war went back and, you know, had some entrepreneurial streak and saw the opportunities. And of course a lot of the young guys came back and they'd had such well, I wouldn't say adventurous life, but going back into an office and becoming a clerk or whatever like that really didn't attract them. So a lot of them went fishing simply just for the adventure that was around it. You could buy a little boat for next to nothing, make a few pots yourself and get out and make more money from crayfish than you could from working in an office, that's for sure.
Definitely far from anything that you can buy. I mean, right now we've got internet and we've got, you know, telephones some of the time. Even now the telephone's not that reliable. But really that's why you're thrown on your own resources. Because if you want water to run out of a tap, you have to get a tank, stick it on the roof and find some way to fill it up and have it run out of the tap. There's nothing automatic here. And now we've got, you know, solar panels and wind generators. It's fantastic. We don't have to start the generator to, you know, have power. We've got it, and that's a huge breakthrough for us because you can have a proper fridge instead of a strange Kero fridge, like an antique that was then turned into a gas fridge that never worked very well because they came from the 1930s or something. So everything here is what you make it, and it really still is. The seals come up and, you know, lie on our jetty, and it's like we live amongst them all like we always have, and as far as I can see it hasn't made any difference in the time that I've been here, which is quite a while. I lived and fished here for 35 years and it's changed a little bit, but not that much. The communications have changed a bit, and we used to have a carrier boat. Now we've got our own boat to go and get stuff from the mainland, but it's a long way. There's no way you go there to, you know, buy something. You take the crays in and get your food when you have to. And you made what you needed because there was nothing else to do here, but there's no one to make anything for you. You did it yourself, and it didn't matter what gender you were.
And I've grown up over at the Abrolhos Islands. My dad's been fishing over here for about 52 years. I was born 6 weeks early, so I appeared on the island. Well, I created a bit of excitement for the day. No doctors being here, they radioed for the doctor to come over, but by the time he got here I was already born. My dad had to go to Beacon Island, which is a fair distance away, grabbed the nurse and got back, and she delivered me. Growing up here is, yeah, really great.
Been a coastal fisherman for 40 odd years, and now I'm back here, retired, running the bar for them. You know, it's just a communal hall where people come up and have a few beers in the evenings. About 5 o'clock the pub will open, and they come up and play a bit of pool or table tennis. So it's just a communal meeting place, really. There's plenty of stories and lies to get told here.
There are around 150 lobster fishers at the Abrolhos Islands. The Western rock lobster fishery is the largest single species fishery in Western Australia.
We're just out here pulling a few cray pots, setting at the moment. It's probably a 4-day pull, I think. Beautiful weather. Yeah, we pretty much just work on the price. When the price goes up, we'll fish hard, and when the price goes down, we either pull them out or just spread it out a bit. I'm all for tourism as long as it doesn't really affect the islands too much. Everyone seems to be quite respectful, so no, it's good, I think.
Fishermen have very much been the stewards and the custodians of the islands, as well as fishing, ensuring that all the human history and the wildlife have been well looked after. And I suppose everyone's come to the recognition that life changes now, and we need new people to come in and assist in terms of looking after the islands for the future.
In 2019, the WA state government declared the Abrolhos Islands a national park.
So today's announcement is $10 million for the Houtman Abrolhos National Park over 2 years. That's for infrastructure. Also another $3.8 million towards the management of the park, putting some rangers on the island. So we'll probably have about 3 full-time parks rangers on the island. It will go towards helping us manage. So we've got to protect the pristine, unique environment that's out there, the biodiversity that's there. So we'll put some money into fire, feral weeds, depending on what's needed. But we're confident that that money will go a long way to helping protect what is a very special place.
One that's always been ticking away there has been the tourism thing. You know, just in the background, there's always people wanted to go out and, you know, spend some time at the Abrolhos. 1890s, a couple of times a ship came up from Fremantle with like a little passenger ship, brought people up to the Abrolhos. You know, so way back then, more than 100 years ago.
I read a book written in 1910 about families sailing over there during the school holidays, doing a 3-day sail there and back. So it's not a new initiative. The islands were originally opened up for tourism. That's actually the first purpose under the management order currently. There's 122 islands over there. Some 102 of those are uninhabited. There's a lot of scope to have visitation there at the Abrolhos Islands, and I'd like to see those numbers increase. Let's start small, start first, get some viable operators happening, and just manage the growth from there and what environmental impacts there are. But it can absolutely be done over there at the Abrolhos.
I'm Spags. I'm an Abrolhos Island, Big Pigeon Island fisherman. I've lived here since I was 6 years old. I call this my home. This afternoon we go around to West Side, that's another island just around the track a bit. And we have the traditional 2-up game and a couple of beers as well.
Each Anzac Day, hundreds of people gather to play 2-up. It's a tradition that was started by the local fishermen, but has now morphed into a public event for many tourists.
We know change is here. We've obviously, fishermen have been here for a long time, and we know that things are changing. We've always welcomed visitors into our community, so we are happy to have them here. We just would like them to respect their environment and remember that it needs to be here for a long time to come for our future generations.
Now we're introducing a whole different user group there, which are people of leisure, like myself, I guess, who'd love to interact with nature and explore and see the beautiful sights. So the user patterns will change, and there'll be a lot more pressure on the islands and also the benthic habitat and the corals and everything else.
Can it coexist? I suppose that's the big challenge for everyone now, but certainly if it's done right, there's probably opportunities for the local fishermen to diversify their opportunities to get involved. The fishing story of the Abrolhos itself is a story that visitors admire and want to get exposed to. And I don't think anyone in the next 20 years going to the islands will want to go there and not see fishermen there. So it's a matter about how allowing sustainable fisheries to continue whilst bringing in new interests at the islands.
Been in glass bottom boats on the Barrier Reef up through Ningaloo in Southeast Asia, and I believe that the coral over here is so much nicer, so much prettier. The weather conditions are sometimes not the best. At least with the glass bottom boat, it doesn't matter where the wind comes from, we can go somewhere and see the bottom.
We've been flying tourists to the Abrolhos Islands for about 20 years now, after we helped get the strips opened up for tourism. We would average one tour every day of the year virtually, with visitors from all over the world, as well as lots of Australians.
I've had friends who've sailed over from New South Wales coast, and they actually arrived here and said, wow, these places look so great on the charts, and we got here and they're impoverished. There are no great anchorages, there are no palm trees, there are no hills, and I'm going, yeah, but that's it. That's the thing that the birds love, and you know, you've got to value a place for what it is.
The people who come here as tourists love it. I think without us, in a way, they'd be missing out, because they love the sort of atmosphere of the place, and from a human point of view as well as an animal, you know, the birds and the fish and the islands. I think both things are important, and it's a long cultural heritage of this place which would be very sad to lose.
While many want to see the islands developed into Western Australia's next tourist hotspot, there are those that want the islands to remain a well-kept secret, known only to the fish, the fauna, and the few locals who can get there. The Western Australian government hopes to strike a balance between protecting the biodiversity of the archipelago, while at the same time developing the tourism industry. But as we decide the future of the area, the past maintains its grip, ensuring the Houtman Abrolhos Islands remains a rugged paradise.